I never imagined that a simple backpacking trip would turn into a fight for my very soul. The forest was quiet as I trekked along a narrow trail deep in the mountains, its ancient trees standing like silent sentinels in the twilight. At first, it was the sanctuary I'd always craved. The crisp air, the rustle of leaves, and the soft murmur of a distant stream. But as dusk fell, an unsettling feeling crept over me. That night, I set up camp in a secluded clearing near a bubbling brook. The sky was awash of bruised purples and deep blues, and the fire crackled, offering fragile warmth against the chill. Yet I couldn't shake the sensation that I was not alone. A branch snapped. I bolted upright. My heart thundered. I shone my flashlight into the darkness, but saw only swaying silhouettes of trees. I told myself it was just the forest's natural symphony, the wind, a stray animal. But when I heard slow, deliberate footsteps crunching on the gravel outside my camp, a cold sweat broke over me. I clutched my backpack as if it were a lifeline, my pulse echoing in the oppressive silence. The next morning, determined to leave the terror of the night behind, I resumed my hike along the winding trail. The early light painted everything with a false sense of peace. Yet, as I climbed higher, I noticed something strange. Fresh footprints pressed into the soft earth off the main path. They were unmistakably human, but there was no one in sight. Curiosity warred with caution. I followed the prints, which led me to a dilapidated cabin hidden among gnarled pines. Its weathered door creaked open as if inviting me in. Inside, dust motes floated in the stale air. On a rickety table lay a tattered journal. I flipped through the brittle pages. The entries told the tale of a lone hiker who had vanished in these woods years ago, plagued by the feeling of being hunted. The final entry ended abruptly with a single ominous line, "I have become the hunted." A chill ran down my spine. I stepped back outside, the wind picking up as if to carry away the journal's grim secrets. Then I heard it. A soft, measured crunch of footsteps behind me. I whipped around, heart pounding, but the forest remained mute and empty. As night fell again, I raced back to my camp, every rustle and whisper amplifying my terror. I barely slept, haunted by images of unseen pursuers and the desperate scribbles in that forgotten journal. At dawn, I packed my gear and resolved to follow the trail back to civilization. But as I retraced my steps, I noticed the footprints again. They persisted, always just off the beaten path, as if someone, or something, was tracking my every move. The hours bled together in a haze of fear and fatigue until I finally reached a narrow gravel road. A car pulled over, and I flagged it down, my relief nearly overwhelming. I explained everything to the driver, a kindly older man with eyes that had seen too much. He listened silently before leaning in. "You've encountered the legend of these woods," he said in a hushed tone. "They say a lost soul roams these trails, a hiker who vanished without a trace. Some even call him the Lost Walker." My blood turned cold. I'd heard such stories in whispers at campgrounds and trail stops, but had never believed them. The driver continued, "They say if you meet him, he never truly leaves the forest. Some say he's doomed to wander until he finds a way back, or until he takes someone with him." I shivered as he drove away, the road receding into the misty distance. That night, back in a modest motel room, I tried to piece together the fragments of my terrifying experience. I reviewed every detail, the unsettling footprints, the eerie cabin, the journal's final desperate words. Then, a small envelope arrived at my door the next morning. Inside was an old, faded photograph of that very cabin, taken decades ago, and in the doorway stood a solitary figure. His eyes, haunting and familiar, stared directly into the lens. I flipped the photograph over and gasped at the date. It was from over 30 years ago. My hands trembled as I pulled out my own driver's license. I stared at the date of birth printed on it. A horrifying realization began to dawn on me. Memories, though blurry, suddenly surged back. The accident on that winding mountain road, the feeling of detachment, the echo of a life slipping away. In the cold light of morning, I pieced it together with dawning horror. I couldn't remember ever leaving the hospital after that crash. I reached for the photograph again, heart hammering in my chest. The face in the doorway was unmistakable. It was me, from a past life I had no recollection of. I was not the survivor I believed myself to be. I was the lost walker. The twist was as crushing as it was surreal. I had returned to these woods, not as an adventurer, but as a ghost tethered to the place of my own demise. The footsteps, the chilling presence on the trail, they were echoes of my eternal wanderings, a loop of horror I was destined to repeat. And now, as I sit in this unfamiliar motel room, I understand the true curse of Blackwood's trails. The forest did not just steal my life that fateful day. It claimed my soul, binding me to its endless, haunted paths. I am doomed to wander these trails forever, forever seeking a way home that no longer exists.